planned a surprise party for my parents' anniversary only to discover my dad was secretly living a double life with another woman. And the celebration I organized ended up exposing the truth to everyone in the most heartbreaking way possible. I'd been planning my parents' anniversary party for weeks, like completely devoting all of myself to it, because they never really celebrated themselves. You know, they were the couple who always put everyone else first, and I thought this year, I'd do something for them, something that would show them just how much we noticed their love, how much it meant to us. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table at midnight with my laptop out, scrolling through catering menus and venue rooms, my mom's favorite music playing in the background low, just imagining the look on her face when she'd come in and see all her friends and family waiting, clapping, smiling, maybe even getting a little misty-eyed. And my dad, he's not the emotional one, but I thought maybe I'd catch him with a smile on going on that quiet, proud way he does, the one he saves for special moments. And that carried me through all the craziness, like calling vendors who never called back, or begging my cousins to actually RSVP instead of just saying, "Yeah, we'll see." I even drew money out from my part-time job, skipped nights out with my friends, because I wanted it all perfect down to the nitty-gritty. The cake with their wedding photo on it, the slideshow of the years they'd spent together, the string lights, even the playlist carefully calibrated between old love songs they used to dance to back in the day and the newer ones we knew would keep people dancing. I kept reminding myself, this will be the evening they will forever be talking about. And then the odd bit started seeping in, so subtle initially that I ignored it, such as when I called my dad one afternoon simply to ask him what size suit he was wearing these days, as I wanted to make sure that he was respectable looking for the photos, and he hesitated, which isn't like him. He's usually quick with something like that, and then informed me that he already had something planned for that weekend, which caught me off guard, because what possible plans could be more on his plate than his own anniversary? I laughed it off and said to him, "Dad, you can't plan, this is you and Mom." And he did this little forced sort of laugh and said he'd clear his calendar, but it stuck in the back of my mind, like a splinter. And then I told my mom about the party, without telling her too much, and she smiled sort of oddly, like she was touched but also confused, and she said something like, "It's sweet of you to make all this effort, honey, but sometimes parties release things we're not ready for." And I didn't get it. I wondered if she meant she didn't want people to stare at her, because she's shy like that. But now I'm wondering if she was already psyching herself up for something I couldn't see. Party night. I was nervous but excited, racing around the house making sure decorations, that food was hot, that the slideshow was set, greeting incoming guests and telling them to keep their voices down so it'd be a real surprise, and my heart pounding as I messaged my parents' neighbor, the one I'd enlisted to drive them over, to let them know everything was prepared. There were individuals giggling in hush, the lights were low, everybody hiding behind balloons and the DJ table. And I swear I was back in my childhood again, patiently waiting to jump out and shout, "Surprise!" on somebody's birthday, except this time it meant so much more. As the doors opened and my mother came in, hand across her mouth, eyes wide open, others stepped out from around the bend, and the whole room burst into applause and cheers. And she was filled up, but smiled, you could see, the tears welling. Then my dad came in behind her, and the atmosphere changed. I mean, I felt it in my chest, because right next to him, hanging on his arm like she was at home, was this woman I'd never met. I was thinking initially, okay, perhaps it's a colleague, perhaps she had assisted in keeping the secret, perhaps nothing, but the way they stood, the way his hand instinctively went over hers when the room burst into applause, it was close, intimate, wrong, and I remember my aunt muttering behind me, "Who is she?" while my uncle gave me this confused, almost pitying look, and my mom, God, I'll never forget the way her smile froze mid-expression, like it shattered inside her before her face could catch up. My father, he attempted to wave it away, he let go of the woman's hand fast, moved forward like all was normal, but it was too late. Everyone had noticed, everyone had sensed it, and the room that had been full of laughter and applause just moments before became silent in the most painful manner, as if silence weighed something, as if you couldn't catch your breath under it. My mother did not move, she simply stood there looking at him, then at her, then at him once more, and you could see her entire world shattering right before everyone's eyes. And me, I just stood there frozen next to the table with the cake in it, my hands shaking, because this wasn't in the script, this was not supposed to happen, this was supposed to be love and bliss, not whatever this was. That lady, she blushed for a second, like maybe she hadn't realized, but then I watched the way she stared at my dad, like they shared secrets, like this was no surprise, and my stomach flipped. Somebody coughed, somebody whispered too loudly, and the slideshow behind me started playing on its own, old photos of my parents' wedding flashing across the big screen while my mom stood there fighting to breathe, and I wanted to run up, to turn it off, to protect her, but my legs wouldn't move. And then she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "So this is it." When my mother said those words, "So this is it," I swear time had to have slowed down, like as if every single person in that room felt the ground beneath their feet shift, and for one moment nobody had any idea what to do, like we were all actors in a play and someone had torn the script in two. My father, he tried this rigid half-smile as if he'd be able to brush it all off, but nothing issued forth, no words whatsoever, and you could see the terror flicker in his eyes, as if he'd never known he'd be caught thus, in front of relatives and neighbors and old acquaintances who'd gathered to witness his wedding. The woman next to him shifted uncomfortably, let her gaze fall to the ground, and my mom seated herself straight up in that way she does when she's sitting up with pure willpower. But her hands were shaking, and I saw it. I saw the ring on her finger vibrate against the glow of the string lights I'd hung so carefully just hours before. I had wanted to say something, anything, but what was it? This was their night. This was their time to prove to them that love is forever, that their sacrifices were not a waste. And I was the one who came in and provided a podium for their marriage to end before these people. They started to whisper, cricket noises on nights, humming and soft and painful, and then my cousin, God bless her, tried to cover it up by clapping again, screaming out, "Surprise!" as if we might somehow be able to turn back the instant, pretend that it had never happened, but the damage was done, branded on my mom's face. She looked at me then, briefly, her eyes brimming with this still pain, as if she were saying sorry for something she wasn't responsible for, as if she were regretful that my party had become this nightmare, and it shattered me from the inside out because she didn't deserve that, any of it. I finally found my voice and took a step forward, my throat tight, and I said, "Mom, come on, let's sit." But she would not budge, she just stood there, her eyes on my father, and he, for the first time in my life, appeared small, a boy caught stealing, his shoulders hunched, his mouth opening and closing, searching for words that would not come. The woman finally spoke, softly but firmly, saying, "Maybe I should go," and that jolted him into action, as if he reached out to her arm lightly, shook his head, and said, "No, don't go," which only had the effect of loading the silence with more weight, as if everyone in that room suddenly knew what my mom probably did but never uttered. I could feel this fury well up inside me, this hot anger I couldn't swallow, because how had he done it? How had he led her to walk into a wedding celebration? A wedding celebration his own daughter had planned out. Like, what arrogance, what cruelty was that? My mother first spoke his name, once, quietly and forcefully, and he winced as though the sound of it was a physical pain, and she stood up and walked away from the crowd, her back rigid, not running, not breaking down in public, just walking with this silence of dignity towards the door, and the way she left, all eyes on her, was worse than if she'd cried. I followed her behind, my chest tight, over the whispers, over seeing my dad stuck at my mother's side with that woman still clinging half to him, because the only thing that mattered was making sure my mom wasn't alone. I caught up to her in the hall, and she leaned against the wall as if the weight of it all had finally landed on her. I didn't know what to do. I'm her daughter. I don't repair things this size. But I hugged her back, held her while she trembled, and all I could get out was, "I'm so sorry, Mom, I didn't know," and she whispered, "It's not your fault, baby, it's not your fault." But I could feel the way that her body trembled, as if her whole world had just been rocked off its axis. We sat like that for a while, and I remember the distant sounds of murmuring in the large room, the sound of people debating whether they should go or whether they should stay, the strained laughter, the shattering glasses, the constant soundtrack of the slideshows still playing over and over again like some evil reminder of the past. My mom did finally stand up straight, wiped her face, and said, "We are going to go in. You worked so hard to get this, and I am not going to let him take that away from you too." And I was shocked, because there she was, broken apart on the inside, and she was still worried about me, about my effort, about the party. I implored her not to. I said, "Mom, we don't need to. We can go. We owe nobody anything." But she shook her head, that same inner strength in her voice, and told me, "No, I want them to look and see me stand." And so we went back in, both of us, side by side, and the room fell silent once again as we entered, the eyes darting from her, to me, to my dad, now looking like he hoped the ground would open up and swallow him whole. The woman moved back to the side of the room, standing uncomfortably near the drink table, pretending that she was looking at her phone, but you could feel the shame coming from her. My mom marched straight past my dad without a word, to the nearest table, sat down, smoothed out her skirt, and looked up at me with a barely audible nod, as if to say, "Go on, get on with it." So I did the only thing I could do. I walked over to the DJ, asked him to shut down the slideshow, and then I took the mic, my hands shaking so violently I thought I'd drop it, and I said, "This party was going to be about love, and even if tonight didn't exactly go according to plan, my mom's worth celebrating, because she's given her whole heart to this family. My voice cracked, but I kept going. "So if you're here tonight, I ask that you stay for her, not for anyone else, just for her." And the room changed again. Some people applauded, some people nodded, a few wiped away tears. And for a moment, for a second, it felt like maybe she wasn't quite alone in that heartbreak. My father settled into the corner, silent. And for the first time I didn't believe he was the mighty man I had always admired, but that he was just a man who'd lost everything, and I wasn't sure whether to hate him or pity him, undefined or maybe both. The remainder of that night was like walking through a dream, one of those heavy, slow dreams where each step is harder than it has to be, and the air closes in around you, and I couldn't help but wonder, how did this happen? How did a night of celebration for my parents' marriage end up being the breakup of it for all those people they know? Everyone tried to keep the momentum going. My cousin got a few people on the dance floor. Some of the elderly guests stayed glued to their chairs murmuring as if they couldn't wait to tell the tale later. But the truth was no one could ignore the elephant in the room. My mother sat in her chair like a queen refusing to bend, smiling graciously at whoever came over to see her. But I recognized that smile. I recognized that it was the one she wore when there was not enough money or when she had a headache and did not want to ruin the day. And it ached in my chest because she should not have to hold herself together like that tonight. My dad barely moved, just sat there holding a drink in his hand that he wasn't even taking a sip of, just gazing off into it like he was hoping to be able to slip inside the glass somehow. And that woman, the other woman. I still can't bring myself to call her anything but that. She lingered on the periphery for a little while before finally sneaking out quietly. But not before sharing this rushed look with me, as though she needed to communicate, as though she needed me to know that she was not the monster here. But I couldn't even understand it. I didn't want to hear it. I wanted her out of there. And when she finally left, it was like the room finally exhaled, but the pain was still aching around us. One of my uncles, who'd had way too much to drink, somehow managed to say something to my dad about shaming the family, and another one of our relatives was trying to calm him down, but the words had already hung there, stinging. My dad didn't respond. He didn't argue, didn't quarrel, didn't even dispute it. He just sat there like a man who was watching his whole life burn around him. And maybe he found silence the safer option. But to me, to everyone else, it sounded like a confession. I couldn't handle it anymore. I stepped outside for air. My chest tightened, my hands still trembling. And that was when my mother followed behind me, her high heels making soft clicking sounds on the pavement. She didn't cry. She didn't even look angry. She just stood next to me, her face looking up at the string of lights that we'd hung over the entrance. And then after a moment of silence, she hardly whispered. I knew. Those were the two most difficult words to hear that night. I stared at her, confused, and nodded slightly, her eyes still locked on the lights. I didn't know who or how far it went, but I knew something wasn't right. You live with someone long enough, you sense the distance before you see the evidence. My throat tightened. I didn't know what to say. A part of me was upset. Upset that she had to suffer that uncertainty by herself. Upset that he put her there. Upset that I thought I was planning a night about celebrating their love when in fact I was making a highlight on their pain. But at the same time, a part of me felt this profound sadness, too, because to hear her say it aloud meant she'd been carrying that shadow around for years before tonight. She turned towards me then, at last, and her face was serene in this devastating manner, as if she'd already cried in secret, far in advance of the party. Don't blame yourself, she whispered, as though she actually heard the shame wailing inside me. You wanted to give us something lovely, and you did. It's not your fault that he brought his truth into it. I shook my head, the tears finally spilling over, because how was she still standing up for me right now? How was she still holding me in her arms when she was the one betrayed? I hugged her again tight, and she let me, but soon she pushed me away and said, I want to go home. So we went in, I put her coat on, and people started to see us head towards the door. Some tried to intervene and say things like, don't leave yet, let's get our picture taken, or, are you sure? But I just shooed them away. My dad got up when he saw us leaving, his face pale, and for a second I thought he would come with us, like he would go with us. But my mum didn't even glance at him. She walked past with her chin up, and I followed behind. The drive home was quiet, only the vibration of the road underneath the tires, and I could glance over and see her holding her purse so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. I wanted to ask her 1,000 things, how long she'd known, what she was going to do now, whether she still loved him, but the words didn't come. It was selfish to demand answers from a woman who was already bleeding. As we pulled into the driveway, she finally sighed and said, you should go back. Your guests, they came for you too. But I shook my head at once. I am not leaving you this evening, I told her, and that was that. She regarded me, this exhausted, thankful smile flashing across her face for one instant, and nodded. Inside, the house felt weighty, as if the walls themselves knew that something had broken. She went silently up the stairs, and I sat in the kitchen staring at the balloons I had hidden away in a corner to spare for another time, still half inflated and challenging me with their color. My phone was ringing constantly, calls from family, from friends at the party, some of them apologizing, others asking what had happened, a couple already gossiping, but I lacked the energy to answer any of them. I just sat, alone in the quiet kitchen, realizing that the man I thought I knew, the father I trusted, was not who I thought at all. And I understood something else as well. My mom had been walking around with this weight in secret. Perhaps for months, perhaps for years, and tonight was not the start of the hurt, it was only the reveal of it. And I resented that I was the one who had provided the backdrop. The following morning was surreal, like waking up someone else's life and not mine, not that my parents were together in, not the one where my dad was still the man I knew him to be, not the one where this night of laughter and dance was supposed to have been last night, not this one of whispers and shattered eyes. The house was so quiet that every creak of the boards seemed to reverberate, and when I came down, my mom was already sitting at the table, a cup of coffee in front of her, unbroken, her eyes red but not wet. She glanced up and did a little smile, the kind that tries to say, "I'm okay," but doesn't quite get there. I sat across from her, not knowing what to do with my hands, words, and after a long silence I finally spat out, "What now?" She spun her coffee around and around in slow circles, as if she were short of time, before she said, "I don't know. But I can't go on pretending." To hear her say that, in that controlled voice, was more heavy than if she had shouted. It was that she'd made up her mind, or at least crossed the threshold that she couldn't turn back from. And I needed to cry, I needed to be mad. But above all, I just needed to hold her close and tell her that no matter what, I was with her. We didn't speak much after that. She went about her day like a specter, sweeping, folding extra laundry, pacing back and forth between rooms as if she was trying to stay busy so she wouldn't collapse. I kept glancing at my phone. My dad had texted me, messages like, "Can we talk?" and "Call me please," but I couldn't. I didn't want to hear his apologies, not yet. Not when my mother was just a few feet from me, holding her world in her trembling hands. He appeared at the house anyway later that afternoon, however. I heard the car in the driveway, the slamming door, and then the knock on the front door. My stomach dropped. My mother froze in the kitchen. For an instant, neither of us moved. Then she wheeled around and whispered to me, "Open it." I did. He stood there, shorter than I'd ever known him to be, his suit jacket frayed, his tie loose, his eyes heavy. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice low, almost pleading. I didn't want to tell him no. I didn't want to close the door. But my mom waved her hand from behind me, so I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, like he knew he didn't belong there anymore, and when he saw her, he stopped. They just looked at each other, a whole history between them, decades of love and fights and kids and sacrifices, and now betrayal. Finally he spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice cracked. "I never meant for it to." My mom cut him off, sharp but calm. Don't lie and say you never meant to. You chose it, over and over. Don't pretend to be shocked by playing coy about it." He flinched, but didn't argue. He just nodded, tears welling in his eyes. I never once saw him cry in my life, and seeing it now did not fill me with peace. It just made me angry, like he was only now allowing himself to feel because it was too late. "For how long?" my mother asked, her voice shaking for the first time. He hesitated. "More than a year," he acknowledged. My stomach roiled. A year of lies, of secret moments, of pretending everything was okay in this house. I was sick. My mother closed her eyes, and for a moment I thought she was going to cry. But when they opened once more, there was steel. "Then it's finished," she said in a flat voice. "We're finished." The silence that followed was choking. My dad had his mouth open as if he was going to protest, but he didn't. Maybe he understood that there was nothing left to fight for. He nodded slowly, wiped his face, and whispered, "I'm sorry," again before turning around and departing. The door slammed shut behind him. My mom collapsed then, for a brief instant, covering her face in her hands and sobbing soundlessly, and I threw myself to her side, holding her the way she had held me when I was a child and scared. And in that moment, I understood something that has stuck with me since. Love doesn't always crash in a storm. Sometimes it crashes quietly, in the quiet decision to not pretend anymore. The following days were tough. Family called day and night, some being supportive, others fishing for news, and I hated that people would turn my mom's heartbreak into a story they told. She stayed firm though, firm in a manner that I had no concept she was. She got a lawyer, made arrangements, and with each advancing step toward rebuilding, I was both proud of her and abysmally sad. My dad tried it, of course, calls, texts, bouquets on the porch, but my mom was unmoved. She was done. And me? I had this guilt that it was my fault I had created the road, the one that converted their internal fracture into an outer collapse. But my mom wouldn't allow me to keep it. She halted each mention of it with the same phrase. "It was going to come out one way or another." Better now, at least, than it might have been 10 years later. And maybe she was right. Maybe truth always comes out, no matter how deep you try to bury it. Looking back now, months later, that evening is altered to me. Yes, the evening everything fell apart. But it was also the night my mother finally stopped living in suspicion. The night the truth came out into the light where it could no longer be ignored. It hurt. It shattered us. But it also set her free, in a sense. And me, too, because I stopped seeing my parents as invincible, and started seeing them as human, with weakness and decision and agony that I couldn't mend for them. Undefined. If anything I've learned is anything, it's this. Sometimes the most appalling moments bring out people in the sharpest, most unflinching light. And even though I'll never forget the sound of that silence when my dad walked in with her, I'll also never forget the strength my mom showed when she stood tall anyway. Undefined. That's what I hold on to now.